Hey guys. Okay, so today's chapter is riddled with mysteries, suspense, and a little bit of terror. Now, I just want to say writing this chapter was difficult for me because I'm not a dark person. For those of you who know me, I am the opposite of spooky, darkness, all of those things. But when writing this chapter, it felt necessary to really elaborate on the darkness, to illustrate that no matter how dark things can get in your life, no matter what face the devil shows you, God's light overpowers that. So in order to really drive that home, I had to be extra descriptive about the darkness. But let me just tell you, when this chapter takes a frightening turn, just know that around the corner, there is something amazing to counter that. It sort of reminds me of the experience of the first vision. When Joseph went and prayed in the sacred grove, he encountered an intense darkness. So I pulled from his experience and elaborated just a bit more. But after that darkness, when things feel completely hopeless, that's when hope comes. So yes, this chapter is a little bit intense, but we're not going to leave you hanging there. It's going to end on a good note. This book definitely was a challenge for me. It was outside of my comfort zone for sure. But again, it's with the intent to reach an audience of people who can relate, who have experienced hopelessness, sadness, confusion, and darkness to these depths, with the intention of showing them there's always hope. Don't fall for the lies and the deception of the adversary. There is always light at the end of the tunnel, and God's power triumphs over all. Having said that, are you ready to read? Let's do it. Chapter 19, A Deadly Force. Isn't Gia coming back this week? She comes back Friday. Only 4 more days, huh? It feels like an eternity, but when you put it that way, I think I can manage. After getting through such a crazy weekend, I think you can easily manage. So, what are your plans for today, honey? Wes is coming home from the hospital. I'll probably visit him sometime tonight. I think I might go for a run this morning, maybe out by the lake. Well, I'm going to run to the store to get some things. I want to make some pies this afternoon for the church bake sale. I was thinking you and Grandma could help me, and maybe you could take a pie to Wes and his family. What kind are you making? Cherry, blueberry, and peach meringue. Grandma's peach meringue? Of course. Promise me you'll make an extra one just for us. Well, only if you help. The bake sale is tomorrow. Count me in. Great. Grandma's in the kitchen pitting cherries. You can start by helping her. Mrs. Day grabbed her aqua leather purse and sunglasses, then headed out to the garage. The white sundress and gold gladiator sandals looked more like a beach outfit than grocery shopping and pie-making attire. It wasn't unusual for Celeste's mom to overdress for most occasions. Celeste made her way into the kitchen, where her grandma stood in front of the sink, briskly pitting a large bowl of cherries. She seemed so happy in her element. Hi, Grandma. Can I join you? Of course. You know, they say great company makes for great cherry pitting. Do they? Well, then great cherry pitting must make for great cherry pies. Celeste's grandma smiled as she scooted over to make some room. You can have the heavy-duty pitter. I take it this is your first time? Yes it is. Well then, you're in luck. I'm a seasoned and experienced cherry-pitting professional. How would you like to be my apprentice today? I would love to, as long as you promise to show me all of your secrets. Your pies are the best. With as many peaches as my tree produced over the years, I had a lot of pie-making practice. Your grandfather really loved homemade pie, and the peach meringue was always his favorite. It's mine too. I think I'll take one to Wes's family tonight. How is that young man doing? He's doing well, a couple of broken ribs, but he's not letting that stop him from going right back to work. And how are the two of you? Well, we are doing a lot better. I had my doubts last week, but now everything seems to be on the up and up. That's good to hear, sweetheart. And how about that other boy? Ezra? I'd like an answer to that question myself. If I could just go on a date with him, it would make a world of difference. But, even though we've never been on a date, it feels like I have known him for years. It's hard to explain. So, you like this boy, Ezra? I do, to the point that I don't even try to figure him out. I have this strange and amazing trust with him. I mean, Grandma, if he asked me to marry him tomorrow, I don't think I would hesitate. But Wes, on the other hand, who I have known for years, as much as I would want to say yes, I would actually have to think about it. I saw him on TV Saturday on the news. You were standing next to him in the background, right before your interview. You saw him? You saw him! How did you know that was Ezra? A grandmother's intuition. You mean your gift? I suppose you could call it that. Her grandma winked at her as she popped a cherry into her mouth. These are the perfect pie-making cherries. That was a good one. Grandma, you saw him. You are the first person I know to finally see him. So, what did you think? I can see why you'd marry him in a heartbeat. He has the 3 H's. He's handsome, heroic, and humble. The 3 H's? Where did you come up with that? After the war, that's what us gals looked for in marriage material. It wasn't too hard to come by either, not like it is these days. Your grandfather, he wasn't perfect, but he met the criteria, and I was one lucky lady. Beaming with joy, Celeste was happy to be pitting cherries with her grandma. This was one of the best days yet this summer. So, do you think I have a chance with someone like him? Look at you, Celeste. You are one stunning young lady. Any man would be crazy to pass you up. That's why Wesley won't give up on you. You are too much to lose. Sometimes I don't think you realize just how beautiful you are. Thanks, Grandma. You always know just the right thing to say to me, and just when I need to hear it. I do enjoy our talk, Celeste, so much that I didn't even realize we stopped pitting cherries 5 minutes ago. With this kind of distraction, I don't think we'll ever finish. Why don't you go for your morning run, and I'll take it from here? I think you're right, Grandma. We're not very productive, are we? Celeste laughed as she went into the mudroom to grab her running shoes. Her endorphins were so high, she felt as though she could run from here to the lake and back, at least 5 times without feeling the least bit winded. It was Monday, and that meant one thing. Her heart fluttered with exuberance as she laced up her shoes and headed out the front door. Later that day. It was such a beautiful day. To think that the month was almost over was hard to believe. Just one more month left to get her life the way she wanted it, before going back to school and work. So far, it seemed very possible. As the road turned, Celeste ran off the beaten path towards a small trail, a shortcut to the lake. The shade from the tall green foliage was the perfect shelter from the blazing summer sun, which had given Celeste's skin quite the sun-kissed glow. The way that the branches and leaves reached out to brush against her arms was evidence that this path was known to very few. Celeste could sense that the lake was near, as the scent of algae and wet wood met her nose, followed by the smells of barbecue and boat exhaust. She could hear a distant speedboat hitting the waves as the traffic from the busy road faded farther and farther behind her. The sounds and smells reminded her of the night she and Wes fell off their paddle boat. What a moment that was! What a night! Her smile from recalling such an amusing and recent memory was soon intercepted by the memory of the video Wes had shown her. Upon realizing that he came to her and showed her that video after having his life-changing moment, began to stir some confusion and speculation in her mind. The news reporter had seen Ezra. Celeste's grandma had seen Ezra. So why was it any different for Wes and Oakley? If Wes had been a part of tampering with the video to erase Ezra out of the footage, why wouldn't he have gotten that off his chest, along with his other confessions? Was it possible that Oakley had tampered with the video and then shared it with Wes? But he said that they both were eyewitnesses to seeing Celeste talk to herself. If the news reporter, Celeste's grandma, the victim of the fallen tree, and the neighbors had all seen Ezra, then that could only mean one thing. Wes and Oakley had lied. But why? Why wouldn't he have confessed that to her the other night? Why would he keep the lie going? Did that mean that his apology wasn't genuine? What else was he keeping from her? Accusing thoughts and distrust began to swirl through her head as a heavy weight pressed down upon her conscience. The sunlight seemed to suddenly disappear as it grew dark and gloomy all around. Slowing down her speed, Celeste exited from the lonely patch of woods and onto the beach. Keeping her eyes where the water met the sand, she tried her best to push the negative thoughts out of her mind. The sound of a boat engine turning off steered her eyes upward towards a nearby dock where a white sailboat sat bobbing up and down on the waves. Before looking away, Celeste couldn't help but notice the woman climbing out of the boat. A very tan man in his 40s, with a white fedora hat, dark curly hair, and a light blue Havana shirt, took the woman's hand and helped her onto the dock. He made some kind of joke, and the woman laughed as she turned around to walk towards the beach. As the woman got closer to the shore, Celeste panicked as she realized it was her mother. Quickly, she ran back towards the woods, and from behind a jungle of wild shrubs, Celeste watched her mother walk to her car, get in, and drive away. The smile on her mother's face was appalling. What had just happened? Who was that man, and what was her mother doing with him? Why had she lied and said that she was going to the store? Celeste's thoughts began to run wild as she imagined the worst-case scenario. In disgust, she fell to the ground and buried her eyes in her hands. How did this happen? Her stomach felt sick as she thought about her parents' appointment with Dr. Kramer. Her mother had been so eager to seek counseling and fix their marriage. Her father as well. For once, everything seemed to be gaining a sense of normality in their life. And now all of that would be thrown away. Her mother had been keeping a dreadful secret. A sudden change of temperature sent chills down Celeste's body. As she lay on the ground, sickened with disbelief, she noticed the light quickly disappearing all around her. It was then she saw the image of a thin, transparent figure standing a few yards away. She looked up to gain focus of the image and saw that it was similar to that of a very thin, skeletal-looking man. He wore a dark robe with a hood and was looking down. His hands were bony, his fingernails long and filthy, and his feet were covered by the robe which touched the ground. Upon realizing that he was unusually large, about 8 feet tall, Celeste felt a sudden, overwhelming inclination that something wasn't right. In that moment, before she could even look away, the figure raised his head to reveal a thin, pale face with black, empty sockets. There was no expression, no soul, just 2 black, gaping holes looking back at her. Filled with complete terror, Celeste tried to get up and run away, but she couldn't move. An unseen force exerted from this figure that bound her as though she had iron chains wrapped around her feet. She tried to scream, but even her mouth was bound in chains. The figure moved closer, almost hovering off the ground, as intense hatred and complete disregard for her very life permeated from its existence. Feelings of hopelessness, gloom, misery, pain, sadness, and fear swelled inside of her chest. It felt as though she were a helpless field mouse being strangled by the tight, coiled grip of a venomous snake. Consciousness was fading away as doom and despair sank in. Powerful thoughts about the distrust of her mother and Wes engulfed her psyche. Intense fear and anger gripped her heart and shook her to the core. A deep voice, sounding almost non-human, spoke to her from the deformed mouth of the dark and decrepit being. Celeste couldn't understand the words that were being spoken. They were of a language she did not recognize. It sounded as though there were several voices all pouring into one, like some type of demonic Gregorian chant announcing her destruction. Cries for help shouted through her mind, but would not escape her lips. No one would ever find her here, not for quite some time. She was completely alone and vulnerable, a victim of impending death and doom. Her heart raced so quickly she felt as though she would die from a heart attack before this creature could touch her. Breathing quickly became more and more difficult as she gasped for air. Whatever this figure was, it had the power to strangle her without laying a single finger on her. This was it. It was over now. She could feel the end near. Her desire to fight it was overpowered by thoughts to allow it to end her life. With all the distrust within her life, it was the right thing to do. Her strength weakened as her energy slipped away, succumbing her to the evil grasp of this horrifying entity. The figure now hovered over her, its razor-sharp teeth covered in black sludge. Celeste closed her eyes and braced herself for the impact of death, when, suddenly, a bright light came from behind her. It grew brighter and brighter until overpowering the dark entity, causing it to sink to the ground. It gnashed its teeth, batted its arms, and let out a roar of screams and cries as it lowered into the ground until completely vanishing from sight. A warm peace flooded through Celeste as her breathing returned. She took a deep breath and turned her head to see who or what was behind her. There, standing in an honorable and virtuous demeanor, glowing with light from head to toe, was Ezra. Before Celeste could say a word, he stretched out his hand for hers and said, "Celeste, it's time for you to know." And that's it for today's chapter. Yes, we're going to leave it at that. Join me next week as we read chapter 20, Through Space and Time. We'll see you then.